Right, guys. So Resident Evil 8, we have just finished. I'm going to give you guys my quick thoughts and feelings. I'll try and do it as swiftly as possible and not make it run too long. But for the most part, Resident Evil, we know the franchise very well. I don't need to talk too much about that. But we played Resident Evil 7 not too long ago. We've been waiting on Resident Evil 8, and we were super excited. It finally pops, and we enjoy it. You'll notice here it took us 13 hours to beat, and we played on standard mode. I actually think in hindsight, hardcore would have been absolutely perfect for us. But regardless. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Resident Evil 8, did I enjoy this game? Yes, I think so. It's very nice to see a Resident Evil 2 remake / Resident Evil 7 game appear again, but on a longer scale. This game is longer than 7, and it's longer than some of the other remakes we've seen recently, like Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3. I really enjoyed 2, and I quite enjoyed 7, although sometimes I felt it was a little bit clunky. And this game takes a mixture of both of those games and makes a brand new Resident Evil game, which I think is actually really good. I paid quite a lot of money for this game, as a lot of games these days are expensive, so you know, if you want to get a 13-hour, 12-hour segment out of a game like this and buy it right now for full price, you guys are more than welcome to do so. But if you're watching this review in the future and the game's like, you know, $20, $30, definitely consider grabbing it if you're a Resident Evil fan, because this game is pretty good, it's pretty spicy, and it's got some decent aspects, so let's talk about it. The things I like the most about this game, obviously, were the setting. I start a lot of reviews off that, like, by saying that line these days, it seems, but for the most part, the atmosphere that the game gives you at the very beginning looks and feels stunning. You get thrown into the kind of village in the snow, and it looks very kind of Transylvanian. All we know is that it's somewhere in Europe, and it's cold, and there's a bunch of monsters trying to kick your ass, and it's fantastic. I think this game will look amazing on the PS5, and it'll look amazing, even more amazing on PCs, high-end PCs, so if you get an opportunity to pick it up there, then by all means have a blast. We ran this game on PS4 though, and there was no console issues at all, even though the PS4 is an old banger piece of hardware at this point. If you're thinking about getting it on the older consoles, it still runs perfect. It runs absolutely smooth. There was a couple of instances towards the end where there was some frame rate issues with the kind of final boss showdown when there's a lot of particles going on, but other than that, it shouldn't hold you back. I loved roaming about in this game. My favourite aspects of Resident Evil 2 is running about survival horror and picking and choosing your routes, picking and choosing your items, and this game brings that back. So if you liked looking for stuff in Resident Evil 7, if you liked looking for stuff in Resident Evil 2, or maybe even Resident Evil 4, if you want to go back that far, this game has a lot of similarities to that, and it's great. The shooting feels super responsive. We're playing as Ethan now, who's had training since Resident Evil 7. I felt like, and this could just be purely placebo in my mind, but I feel like the Ethan of this game feels a lot more responsive than the Ethan of Resident Evil 7. So the gameplay feels really fun. You go back to this kind of shambling Lycan monster. You're not fighting zombies in this game, you're fighting against like the Lycans, and you go back to this kind of shambling routine where even from the beginning of the game, the zombies, or again the Lycans, are fun to shoot, and the combat is super kind of fun to learn and get the grips of. You're going to feel wobbly at first when you try and take your first few shots, but once you get over it and you get used to it, everything runs really smoothly and it goes well for the most part. You will come across a ton of gun upgrades in this game. They've brought back the Merchant, the Duke. I'm just going to talk about this in a kind of randomized order. So the Duke appears, this weapons gunsmith, which is quite exciting. They've obviously brought that back from Resident Evil 4, and I was super excited to see that. The Duke's got a lot of personality, and he's pretty funny. I love looking around for ammo. I love looking around for herbs. I love looking around for gun upgrades, treasures, and then taking it back to the Duke, selling all your stuff, upgrading the guns that matter the most to you, and then playing the game in a survival sense. So in terms of the graphics, in terms of the combat, the two kind of main things that I would look at the beginning of Resident Evil are both really good, so I think you'll like that. The game is actually really horrifying at times. There are sequences in the beginning, especially when you're just settling in. It feels really creepy to be looking around the village and, you know, you got monsters attacking you. Very good kind of horrific atmosphere. Some people might look at this at face value and think, oh, they're still going for the kind of classic kind of, you know, action-adventure-esque Resident Evil, and they kind of are sometimes, especially towards the later aspects. We'll talk about that later, but you do get horror aspects in this game. There are sequences, without spoiling too much, particularly when you get to the second part of the game. You're fighting against one of the lords, and you go to an area of the game that is completely and almost psychological horror. It's like a simulator, a puzzle room, an escape room, if you like, and there's some really, really wild and creepy moments in there. So if you're looking for spooks, this game's definitely got spooks. It's got good combat and it's got spooks, and it blends those two together quite nicely. The story itself is a bit wild, and I kind of enjoyed it. The acting and the performances is good, but you're kind of continuing on from Resident Evil 7 with Ethan's story, and the way that it ties into Lady Dimitrescu, the Four Lords, and Mother Miranda, who is like at the center of this game. It all flows pretty smoothly for the most part. The ending, you know, is a bit kind of wacky at times. There's a couple of plot twists and reveals. Chris makes his appearance, and it's pretty good for the most part. It's interesting, and I'm intrigued to see what they do next, because this game kind of builds up and leads on to a suggestion that there's going to be more. I think they announced a long time ago that Resident Evil 7, 8, and 9 were going to be a trilogy of sorts, so yeah, you can see that they're setting up for the next game, and I guess that's fine. That's intriguing. If it plays anything like this game, I think it'll be worth, and it'll be... There was a couple of times where the map just felt wrong, and what I mean was, when you're navigating around, you're looking at your map and you're using it to kind of access different areas. Sometimes there were literally barricades on your map, or sorry, there was barricades in front of you, but not on the map. And it was very unusual because some barricades were marked by lines, little thin lines showing you that you could access those routes. And then other times the map didn't have those things on it. And I'm not entirely sure why. You might say, well, some of the barricades were like crashed trucks and broken down houses and things. Those wouldn't be on a normal map. But if we take a little step outside our immersion comfort zone for a second and realise that the fact that your map lights up red and blue when you found all the treasures and houses, I'm pretty sure they could have included, you know, when I'm pretty sure they could have included all these kind of roadblocks on the map. It would have definitely just made for a better navigation system in general. Don't need to go too much into it, and it wasn't a huge problem, but some people talked about how this game peaks a little bit too early. I watched a couple of reviews before playing this game, and some people said that the game gets a little bit you know, it's kind of like there's a strong midpoint, and then towards the end, some people might not have seen that carried through, if that makes any sense. And I can understand where they're coming from, because as soon as you kind of, I guess I really enjoyed the aspects of the castle the most, and that part of the game kind of ends prematurely. Now, I don't know if that's because of the marketing that was tucked into this game before you actually start to play it. A lot of people associated Lady Dimitrescu and the castle as being like the later aspects of the game, whereas you kind of play through those fairly early on, and then the second and third and fourth portions of the game come after. So I can kind of get where people are coming from, but another thing is that the factory towards the ending of the game felt a bit kind of long-winded, and I think other people might agree with that. It's a bit... It keeps going on, and there's even bits where Ethan himself as a character says, "Oh my god, again?" as he gets like knocked down a hole for the 9th time, and then you end up having to like fight through black corridors and dark areas, and that bit did stretch a little bit, but I think if you pace yourself and play the game in little segments, you'll be absolutely fine. We blasted through it in quite a large chunk, so I can understand if people were reviewing the game and trying to get through their reviews fast, those segments might have been a bit tedious. But there's one puzzle that I really just didn't get, and it was the lighting the torches one. There was a secret room, not the torches you light at the very beginning. Most people will see this one, but there's a treasure map that's connected to a secret room that you get to later on after you get I think it's the insignia key or something. There's these swinging torches. The game loves its physics engine, I tell you. There's these hanging torches that were way more annoying than they needed to be. I'll just throw that out there. I don't think they're ever going to patch it, but there's a point where you have to blow a hole in a wall, and you light one torch with a brazier that is already lit, and then you use the second torch to light the third one, and then that lowers the gate to access the treasure. Now, if you've gotten to that point, you've already found the treasure map, and you've already traced the treasure map to the room, and you now have the key to get into the room. Once you've blown open the fucking wall to expose the lit brazier, you've pretty much done all of the legwork. You've done 99% of the legwork. And lighting these two fires is fairly straightforward. Trying to get the fires lit, though, is unnecessarily painful. Some people might get it literally like that, and if that's you, if you manage to light those beacons rapid as fuck, then great. I'm so happy for you. That pissed me off so much. We were in that room for like 10 minutes. I'm not even kidding. Eventually we got it, but that was unnecessarily frustrating, and I really just wish they hadn't made it so. Even just increase the swing physics of the lantern would have been so much better, but they chose not to. I don't know why. I don't know if they tested that or if they just enjoyed the fact that it was monotonous. But I'll say that one other aspect about this game that I really enjoyed was the kind of optional areas where you can go to secret areas if you manage to find them, if you've got keys, if you've got the equipment to access certain points. You can go back and visit little sub areas. And inside the little sub areas, you're going to find a bunch of treasure, you're going to find gun upgrades, and you're also going to sometimes find optional bosses. And I love that. I really didn't think they were going to put that in, because normally in Resident Evil games, you never have like optional sub areas. You do, I guess, from time to time, maybe in certain like 1 or 2 titles, but for the most part, it's almost unseen. And I love the fact that you could take your boat and go down the river and find a little cave with a bunch of stuff in it if you bothered to look. And there was a couple of segments like that. We went back to certain areas once we had like doors, keys to open doors, or like tablets to open certain walls and things like that. We would go back, and when we went back, sometimes a giant boss would appear out of nowhere, and you could fight the boss, and that was actually genuinely really fun. There's a couple of standoff moments towards the kind of middle end game point as well, where you're fighting against waves of Lycans, and you can actually put mines down and survive kind of onslaught moments. So all your equipment that you've been finding from these treasure locations, all the treasures you've been selling to make money to upgrade your guns and buy ammo, it all felt pretty worthwhile to me, and I really enjoyed how that tied together. Some people, if you catch the second half of this game, you might think, oh, the game's far too actiony for my liking, but trust me, the game does it in a way that, at least to me, felt kind of enjoyable and smooth. The game starts off, and for 70% of the game, it is a kind of a horror survival game. But towards the end, it becomes a bit more actiony, adventure-y, kind of like Resident Evil 4, kind of like Resident Evil 5. And then towards the end, there is obviously sequences when you play as Chris that is just full-on Call of Duty, quite literally just full-on Call of Duty. And that was alright too. Not my favourite parts of the game, but I enjoyed it enough to... and I just felt like it fitted in correctly, and it was fine. I don't know if it needed to be there, but I wasn't upset about it either. There's a couple of frustrating moments I will add. When I was pointing the laser pen at the giant monster to call in the airstrikes, I'd called in 2 already, and the third one was what was going to finish it off. The guy in the headset was like, call in the strike, man. Chris, call in the strike. Is the laser pen broken? Call in the strike. And I literally had like 10, 12 Lycans punching me in the face while he was calling. He just kept repeating over and over. I was like, dude, shut the fuck up. I know what I'm supposed to do. Can you please be quiet and let me work? So that might have been a thing for other people. I'm not entirely sure, but to wrap up the review in a neat little bundle as quickly as I can, Resident Evil 8 was pretty fun, and I really enjoyed playing it. I think that if it had been a little bit longer, I would have been happy, although some segments like the factory did go on a little bit too long in my opinion, so it's a fine balance. If they had had less factory and then maybe took it back to the village for some more kind of exploration around like new village areas that might have opened that were still outside and quite well lit, I would have kind of liked that. But for the most part, yeah, game was great, and I'm hoping that they continue to take the series in this kind of direction. I think wasn't the best game I've ever played, but in terms of a Resident Evil title that's coming out in 2020, I'm very hopeful for the series, and yeah, it was pretty good, guys. That's my thoughts. If you guys are thinking about picking it up, then definitely go for it, and I don't think you'll regret it too much.